my question to the panel is, having to present yourself a certain way for the sake of fit, has it changed over your careers? And if there's any intersect with imposter syndrome, so does it ever lead to any questioning of one's own real ability? And I'd like to start with Donald.
Yeah, so it's been a big thing for me. So one of the things that you guys can't see over the video is that not only am I Black, which you can see, but I'm also 6'8". So I stick out everywhere I go. And usually if I'm in the tech sector or working in games or what have you, I'm usually the only Black person there. And when I was younger and fresh in my career, I thought for sure that I had to act a certain way, behave a certain way to fit in with who was already there, which was not a lot of Black people, right? And so for me, it didn't hit until like I was later, much later in my career, and feeling more comfortable with my own skills and dealing with imposter syndrome, which I still have some bouts with today. But I started to act more and more like myself, more authentic to myself. And I became like, I started to get a lot more happiness from my job because I wasn't pretending to be someone else every day that I would go into work. But and then on the other part where we were talking about imposter syndrome, man, I always felt like I was like, even if I was really good at my job and I was really overperforming, like I still felt like I was being looked down upon, and I had this idea in my head that I wasn't good as the next person. Like, and it did have to do with race, just because, like, again, I was usually the only Black person in there, and I'm just like, oh shit, you know, let me not mess up, let me not, because if I do mess up, they're gonna get rid of the Black guy, you know. I'm like, shit, I gotta like always work harder, always be better than my peers, but I don't feel like that anymore. So it was big for me.
Lauren, how about you?
It's
Have you?
definitely.
Oh,
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
It's definitely been a present struggle throughout my whole career, for sure. Especially as a Black woman, I've often been the only game dev in a studio of about 400 people full of game devs. And I've always been able to see myself as this person who stands apart, but at the same time, you know, we're here to accomplish the same goals. We're here to accomplish the same things. So I try to focus on it. But I often felt that I was still under much more scrutiny, just like Donald was saying, than everybody else was, just because, you know, of who I am and what I look like and the things that I stand for. And often I would try my best to be an advocate for, you know, diversity and inclusion around our community and our games. And I would often be the most vocal person. And then, you know, people either wouldn't take me seriously or would just expect me to say, it's like, oh, like Lauren probably doesn't, you know, want this to be here. And so I didn't want to be seen as the troublemaker. But the funny thing was that I had an art director back when I worked at my first game studio. And I think within my first few months of being there, you know, I'm this like small, like 5'5" person who loves hugs and like, you know, Pokemon and stuff like that. But during one of our one-on-ones, he said that he thought I was intimidating. And I thought that was really funny. And also I knew why he was saying it because, you know, I'm a Black woman and I'm anything but intimidating. But because he said that, I was like, well, if you're going to think that I'm intimidating, then I'm going to be intimidating and I'm going to speak my mind and say the things that I'm thinking and not edit myself because you expect this from me anyway. And that ended up working to my benefit. We adopted this thing called left-hand column, which basically is the things that you're thinking, but you don't want to say because you're too uncomfortable or for propriety. And so I often adopted this stance where I was like, hey, can I speak from my left-hand column? And then I would say the things that were actually on my mind. And I felt comfortable saying that because he thought that I was intimidating. And so, you know, I was able to twist it and use it to my advantage. And as I, you know, gained more experience in the industry, I felt just much more comfortable just being myself and standing up for what I believed in. So when I applied for Zynga, when I walked into the interview room, I told them exactly what I stood for. I told them that I was going to be a vocal advocate for change and diversity. And they were just like, that's great, we want that. And I was like, perfect, then you know exactly what to expect, and I don't have to change myself anymore. So even though it was an issue when I first got into the industry, it's much less of an issue now because I've decided to be much more authentic to who I am and what I stand for.
Fantastic. Smitty, I see you nodding your head. Would you like to take it away?
Awesome. Yeah. Well, so, and I'm a person who hates to embrace stereotypes, but I am a very loud and boisterous person. I get excited easily. And so when I first started working around, people culturally who I, maybe weren't used to that, I used to get a lot of comments like, "Oh, you're very loud," and they would say it jokingly, but it felt, it made me sort of like swallow my voice, and so I would try to like, I would always try to, be quieter and be more silent, and just the way I talk to people, and so, but I found, later on in my career, as I started to, get positions through management, and, in other positions where I had to speak in front of people, like it was a detriment, me suppressing that. And so, but I had a manager who really, I think, he was in the military. And I think as a society, I don't think we praise the military enough of how they've pushed diversity in our culture. And I think he noticed that in me, and he would put me in meetings a lot to talk and to champion my ideas or present, my artwork in front of a group. And that really helped build my confidence up and sort of be proud of my loud voice and be proud of, who I was and embrace that. And I think, over the years, as I, as everyone else got comfortable being who they are and who they were, I think it's been sort of a calling card. And I think, people I've worked with throughout the, throughout the industry, whenever we meet up again or we talk, that they're like, oh yeah, Mike is, Smitty is like, he's so fun to work with. He's so, and they look at me differently. When I thought it was sort of, a detriment, they looked at it in a totally different way. And so that helped me to realize that, hey, we need, we should embrace who we are. And it's okay, to be you.
So I want to piggyback on what Smitty was saying. So it's funny, I recently had a call where it was my boss and a couple of our team members, and then one of our biggest clients. And we were just kind of joking around. And this is like, again, later on in my career, as I became a lot more comfortable with myself. And the client was joking on me and was saying, oh, the joke was, he was trying to say like, it was, I always felt the pain of being the most handsome man on the Zoom call. And just so happens, I have my brush like right on my desk, because you gotta keep it fresh. And just sure enough, man, I just started like brushing my hair. I was like, yeah, you got doggone right. Just like being authentic and being myself and just being free and comfortable with who I am. And it's always even in a non-joking environment, it's just such a better way to be overall. Like there was my boss had actually held 2 or 3 years ago, he held a town forum where a whole bunch of just non-industry folks, people outside of the gaming world and inside the gaming world came, and we were talking about things about diversity and inclusion. And one of the biggest things is like just being authentic and being yourself and being comfortable with yourself. It's hugely important. So don't try and fit in, just be who you are.
Evan, you come from the writer's room, and it's a bit of a different perspective than the maybe an artist. So who's visual artist. What's your experience been, and have you had to present yourself a certain way for the sake of fit? Has it been the same or different?
So yeah, like you said, Mayet, I do come from writing as a background, and it was a different kind of writing altogether. It was journalism and critique. So on one hand, I've never felt the need to present myself differently because, I have like a let's say a reputation that precedes me. Like I've been writing about diversity, equity, and inclusion a lot in my career as a journalist and critic. So, the minute you decide to do business with me now as a creative, like, what I'm about, right? Like that's precedes me. Um, so I haven't really felt that pressure. I think there is the everyday conundrum of how to modulate your presentation in order to best cooperate with people who you may just start working with for the first time or have different cultural backgrounds. But like, I think there is a specific kind of way of doing it so that you don't feel like you diminish yourself, which is a challenge that we all face. And I think other people have talked about this in that regard. Um, so when when we're talking about imposter syndrome, though, I think there's different shades of that that we can discuss. One of them is the internal kind of psychological phenomenon that we're all familiar with. Can I do this job? Am I worthy? Like self-doubt that kind of mutates into different forms. But I think the other thing that is far more pernicious and likely to happen in this industry is the kind you encounter when there's a lack of community. So you're working on a title or you're working on a project and you're the fly in the buttermilk, right? You're the raisin in the sun. And when you have to take a stand on certain issues that matter to you, um, you can feel like an imposter because there's a lot of vulnerability associated with that. And moreover, when you're in a particular discipline, and you're part of a team, whether it's art, sound design, programming, AI, or whatever, and you're the only person there who looks like you know, there is a element of, okay, do I belong? And that's less internal, like what I talked about before, and that's more about like, okay, the environment I found myself in doesn't seem to foster careers for people like myself. Like, why is that? And then it can be me. So I I I really haven't had a struggle with this. I'm at a place in my career where I feel like I know what I have to offer, but like the flip side of that is how will it be received? So it's I think it's a part of every journey, but I think it's important to identify when the factors are coming from you yourself and when they're coming externally.
Absolutely. Um, Now, Richard, we haven't heard from you. You're coming from education, kind of like me, as well as the head of a company. And how's this affected you, and does it still? And you are
You'll have to give me a few minutes. I'm moving from my car right now.
you're having the same issues I did. Well, we can come back to you, Richard. Carmen, how about you? I mean, you produced and Wizards of the Coast. You're also a writer as well. And you've also worked in comics and games. What have your experiences been?
Hey everyone, I'm in my car also. So, for me, I started my career in AAA games as a designer, and when I first started, I was the only Black person on the creative side of things at the particular studio I was working for. And one of the first things I noticed was sort of the very competitive culture that surrounded um, advancing and being a designer and a creative on that particular team. And I noticed myself starting to pick up some of those habits. Like, for example, I used to be like a really quiet person. I would speak really quiet and slow, but I started to develop the habit of speaking really quickly. And one of the toxic things about the particular environment I was in is folks would talk over each other all the time. And as someone who was a little more quiet, I was very I felt very out of place. Not only because that didn't match the type of person that I was, but also because I was the only Black person there. And from what I learned from my teammates, I was the only Black person to ever be on the design team. Um, that's been kind of a consistent theme for me over the course of my career. But I think one of the biggest takeaways that I've learned from everything is when I first started, a lot of people would sort of tell me things and I would take it at face value because I thought, well, I want to be in this industry and I'm happy to be here. So this person must know what they're talking about. And the worst thing you can do for yourself, especially as a minority person, is to have the happy to be here attitude, because you earned it. Like, you worked hard, you mastered your craft to the point where you can be hired on this particular team. You don't have to be happy to be here. You earned your spot, just like everybody else. Excuse me. And before I started, I had years of experience prior, but people would always tell me my experience didn't count. And so when I would speak to my peers and interview for new positions, I would discount the previous experiences I had because someone else told me that they didn't count. And it was only after like working through a lot of that trauma where I got to the point where I was like, you know what, my experience does count. And if you don't like that, then we're not going to be a good fit working together. So I think that to sum it up, a lot of it was self-discovery in terms of how to navigate the waters when you sort of feel isolated.
Yeah, to piggyback on what Carmen just said, like the happy to be here thing is very insidious because I think video games, like a lot of pop culture industries, they count on that attitude in part of their user base and their aspiring professionals, and it undercuts, like it feeds into the whole overwork, disposable, mentalities that you see plague bigger studios and even smaller ones. Like you're lucky to be here. It's like, no, you're lucky to have me. And I think the sooner you can start to forge a sense of your own self-worth, which can be hard. I don't want to make it sound easy, but the sooner you start to do that, the better you'll be able to advocate for yourself and others like you, other marginalized people like you.
Absolutely. Richard, you let me know when when you're able to talk. I totally understand. The the weather here is not, it's not great.
Texas A&M.
I'm back now.
Okay.
I'm sitting in darkness though.
That's okay. I understand.
Not just metaphorical.
Listen, I
Yeah.
had a camping lantern in my car because that's where I was sitting before the internet came back on.
Yeah. So refresh me on the question.
So the question is having to present yourself a certain way for the sake of fit. And that's kind of followed up with, has it changed over your careers? And if there's any intersect with imposter syndrome, does it ever lead to any questioning of one's own real ability?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for a long time, kind of growing up with different schools and going to different kind of environments, I was just used to adapting to where I was. So I'm used to kind of going into a group, figuring out what people like, they don't like, how they talk, and kind of steering the conversation from there. I don't have a strong sense of this is how I'm most comfortable, or this is my true personality, because I've been doing it so long, and I enjoy kind of getting to know other people as much as I do expressing myself. So when it came to game design and game development, before I ever got into the industry, my first gig was working on an indie title. So it's just my brother and a friend that I met through my blog. So it's just the three of us anyway. And then later I was hired Gunfire Games. So before all that happened, I wrote the book on game design. I sat down on my blog for 5-6 years straight and figured out what game design was for me. So over 1 million words of content, just trying to figure out what that was in as much detail as possible. So there was never a sense of imposter syndrome. I always find talking to other people who are interested in games and design just an interesting opportunity to find where they are in the vast like universe of different approaches to this thing. So that's been fun, but I have noticed a specific kind of what they might call a company culture or personality fit, that being different and even having high standards is part of where people, somebody mentioned before, talking over people was kind of a norm at one studio, and things like that really bother me. So when people are not communicating properly, when people have a habit of talking one way or another, or kind of doing things that I feel like aren't constructive for a professional work environment or a creative environment, that's when it really starts to bother me. So it's not tied exactly to my race, but I can tell that what people are comfortable with and what they find irritating has this big divide between me and them, and that's not always a smooth thing to navigate.
Absolutely. Well, I have a follow-up question, and that question deals with representation, right? So we've talked a lot about fitting in, and now I want to really explore how important is it for people of color to see people that look like them in the business? And to follow that up, specifically, how important do the panelists regard it? And how do you feel about other people looking at you as representatives? And I think I'm going to pick Evan actually to start this off.
I don't know why, but okay. I mean, you know,
Changing it up.
I feel you. You know, representation is a buzzword that gets overused, and you know, especially recently, it's dangerously close to being least of all meaning. That said, you know, I still think it is useful in terms of being like a bare minimum of what can be expected in terms of these entities who want to do business globally and engage with audiences from different backgrounds, right? Like the bare minimum you should be doing is putting characters and ideas on the screen that display a willingness to acknowledge that people exist, Black people matter, and their lives matter, and they exist. Like that's the bare minimum. You know, I think the thing that's trickier and more to the point of your question, Mayet, is that like the behind the scenes stuff. You know, I still say that, you know, I've been around video games upwards of 20 years at this point, and I can't tell you of a Black creative lead on, at least in a AAA sense, on a game that has name recognition, right? I've known a few project leads, you know, but like other than our own esteemed Sean Alexander Allen, who's in this chat as an attendee, like he's the only person I know who's like led a game from start to finish with full creative control. And, you know, Treachery to Breakdown Cities, this game. And, you know, it was a long, hard road for him, but it does communicate a hostility towards people, towards Black people and people with Black marginalized backgrounds when we're not seen in those positions, you know, hostility, disregard, indifference is a word I was looking for. So, you know, as counter programming, visible faces from people of marginalized backgrounds is super important. You know, what it's like to be one of those people, it's, part of my language, fucking stressful. You know, like on one hand, you realize the responsibility. On the other hand, you know, when you become a visible face from a marginalized background in an industry like video games, you know, people want you to solve the problems that are of not your own creation. Systemically, you've not been an architect of these cultures in which people supposedly don't fit, and then they come to you to ask how to fix that. And you know, if you have any sense of responsibility, you try to engage, you know, in good faith. But ultimately, what I found is like you rarely have enough stake or agency within these systems to change them, you know? And oftentimes you're there to do another job. So it's very stressful to be like, okay, you know what? Do the programming, write the story, and also help us solve, you know, the racism within our organization. Okay. So it's stressful, you know, like, which is not to say like I'm not grateful for the opportunities I've been able to engage with and take advantage of, but you know, there's always a double cost. There's always a double cost, and you know, I think, you know, one of the ways to help ameliorate that is to put that up front for the people that you're dealing with, that want these things from you. Like, you know, so it's like, don't work for free. Your time and your experience are valuable. You know, and encourage and push as much as you can. Like, you know, like there's been too many rooms I've been in, like many of us, where I'm the only one, and it sucks, you know, like, you know, so all the pressure you have to represent for your people, like, is multiplied times 1,000. And there's a psychological cost to that, an emotional cost to that honestly no amount of money is going to cover. And you know, a lot of times people who are asking you to do that kind of work don't necessarily realize that. And so make that cost clear when you can. I'm not asking anybody to torpedo their jobs, but you know, like, this is just the fact of reality of people who live outside of like mainstream notions of American existence. Like, you're always having to modulate in a way that people aren't necessarily aware about. I'm sorry if that was too long-winded, but yeah, you went to me first. It's what you get.
I did. No, it was great. I'm actually want to go to Donald next.
Yeah, it's because Evan, you brought up some really, really good things, especially on that last part about like when you are the only one in an organization. Like, some of the thoughts that I would have running through my mind is, not only do I not want to mess up, I just don't want to mess up my job, right? I do want to make things better in this organization or wherever I am, but more so, I don't want to mess it up for the next Black person to walk through the door asking for a job. Because you remember the last guy we hired, Donald? That guy was a total whatever the case may be. That's always a thing that runs through my mind whenever I'm in that situation, and it kills me. But more so, back to the question of like, what do I feel about representation, and how do I feel as someone who has people looking at him? So when we were starting this tonight, I saw at least one father and a child on video. And then I'm pretty sure in chat there was at least like 2 other people that said, hey, I have my kid here. That to me.
So let's apologize for all the cursing. Sorry.
Yeah, I wasn't going to bring that up because you cursed, but I did too.
You started it, Donald. Okay, I did. Let's not derail.
But I do want to apologize. But like, it is important, I think, for those children to see all of us up here, you know, not only talking about the struggle, but also being a resource for them, right? And so part of what I've done with my career is like, I started ATX Game Makers, which is all about increasing diversity and inclusion inside the games industry. So I want more people to come to that organization, not just me, because good Lord, that's a lot of work. But I think it's hugely important for the youth to see us up here. We should be receiving rewards, number one. We should be presenting those awards. We should be those leaders that they can all see is, oh, hey, I can do that. Like, and Evan pointed out another good point. He's like, I can't name, other than Sean, like, I can't name anyone else that's had that kind of control on a product. And that's sad.
I'm sorry, Richard we finally got Richard. We can see him. I want to get to Richard, but I do want to hear from Lauren. Lauren, you're the only female African-American on the panel. And so that representation, I feel like it's doubly so on you. And I'd like to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah, and pretty much any studio that I've been at, I've always been looked to as, that representative of having people kind of look to me whenever any racial issue comes up and being what would you do? How would you solve this thing? And what they don't understand is, like what Evan said, the amount of energy and emotional baggage that takes to actually continuously have to express that opinion and have to try to drive change constantly and try to answer people's questions and try to deal with microaggressions that happen every day of people asking about my background or about my hair. And they're like, oh, I want hair like that too. And I'm like, you don't understand what goes into it though. And it's just all these things that are constant deluge. And then when you try to bring it up to people, they don't really understand it because they don't have to deal with that constant barrage every single day. So, on top of having to manage a team, having to do multiple jobs, because let's be real, we don't just get to do one when we work in the game industry, especially when we're, hardworking people. You have to deal with this whole other aspect, a layer on top of that. And what I would give to not have to feel that every day, I don't know what that's like, but this is our reality. This is what we have to cope with. And so what I have to do is try to continue to be strong. And, just like people have their kids here right now, I also try to show up, back when conventions happened, I would do panels and everything on purpose. And I used to be really shy. I had to get out of my shell and I was like, you know what, like I'm in the industry and I'm in this position now where I'm a leader now in this industry, and I want to be able to show other people that we are out here and that we are doing these things that we once thought could have been impossible for us. And when I would attend those panels, I would have people coming up to me, who looked like me and say, like, you're the first person who I've seen on these panels who actually look like you. I've never seen a Black woman on these panels before. And I'm like, this is exactly the reason why I want to keep showing up, even though it takes so much strain and so much effort to continuously have to, try to make change in the studio, try to continuously remind people like, hey, we can't have that imagery in the game. Hey, maybe you should consider adding some people of color in this crowd. Hey, et cetera, et cetera. And, but because I can do that work and because I'm in that position to start making those decisions, I'm hoping that things will slowly change, and through an influence that, I can talk to people and I can communicate with students and everything, that slowly this industry will start changing and start looking a little bit less homogenous than it is right now. And another thing too is that what I've noticed that when we talk about representation, when we talk about getting more people into the industry, the studios also need to adjust their mindsets as well, because right now a lot of the places that we work at, even if we're there, they're difficult environments for us for the reasons that I just listed above, where we have to deal with these aggressions. And so making other people that are around us aware, and it's not on us to do that. It's not on us at all. Like, because we're subject to this all the time. I would like allies to step up more and kind of take that burden on and share some of that load, because we have to deal with so much of it right now. But right now, so a lot of these environments are not friendly to us, and we tend to churn out of them because taking on that strain is so much extra pressure and so much extra work, and we don't feel like we belong in those environments. When we have events and things like that are for the benefit of Black people, but they're only in response to Black pain instead of celebration of Black joy. And, we only see these things happen in response to a big event, rather than it being like something that is woven into the fabric of the culture of the company. We notice that and we can tell that. And as more of us get into the industry, that will change, but we need more of us in the industry first. And we need more awareness around what we have to deal with every single day, not by just us, but by the people who are working around us.
Absolutely. And by the way, I think Sean Allen just invited you to come speak at GDOC Expo, Lauren, because he picks the speakers. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Sean. I'll happily do that. Everyone, Sean says.
And Richard, we can finally see your smiling face, so I would love for you to speak up. And how do you feel about representation and kind of being that face?
Yeah, similar story to what has been said before. The last time I was on a panel was PAX right before the pandemic hit. And afterwards, somebody who looked like me walked up and said I'd never seen a Black game designer before. And I was like, oh, that's funny. And I thought about it too. And I was like, wait, what other Black game designers do I know? Like, I know a lot of indies, people like Sean and everybody here. But I didn't have a face for anybody in the AAA space. I didn't have a name. I didn't have sort of enough faces pop up. So I thought, yeah, I know plenty of Black artists. I know some Black programmers here and there, and people that I've worked with, but not a lot of designers. I looked through the hashtag people of color in play that was on Twitter the other month and just kind of scraped the whole thing for designers. Anybody that even came close to calling themselves a game designer followed immediately. And it's great to see a lot of writers and artists, and they can more easily express themselves, I think, than game designers who have to, slog on an entire game just to get sort of their fingerprint out there. Game designers have it really hard, and I thought that was kind of an eye-opening experience. So, yeah, representation matters. It's hard when the video game industry at large doesn't do a very good job with accountability, with the credits, or with what happens internally in the company, with good things that happen, or that's amazing. With good things that happen, or with the not so good things. So in an effort to move towards an industry that can handle these things better, I'm thinking, okay, what can I do with my platform? What can I do with my voice? I've written a lot. I offer free game consulting for indies or anybody who wants help or they need help. It's free game design lessons, just kind of providing a resource and putting my face out there for the last 10 years. So, and on the one hand, there's not a lot of designers, so you don't get a lot of traffic. On the other hand, it's just a really neat opportunity to meet so many young designers, people coming up just out of high school and college or just shortly after that, and kind of showing them a little bit of what the industry is and then pushing them in a direction that's a little bit better than what we have.
Absolutely. I want to ask Smitty and then Carmen.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, as a kid, everyone in my neighborhood were like huge Nintendo fans, right? Like everyone had a Sega, everyone had an Atari or ColecoVision. And so like, I feel like as a community, like we're huge gamers, but we don't get that respect. And I think, my brothers and, some of my family members who are huge gamers, seeing me like playing games that I've been a part of, or seeing me, I do it for them, I do it for my kids. And I feel like that's important. I think as I used to be a 3D artist, a modeler, a unit animator, and, even just the simple stuff of like making sure skin tones look right in the game, and like, like they're not too shiny or like they're not too, off color. Like I think is, I think that's a thing. And I remember when I would make units for other ethnicities, or models for other ethnicities, because I was so sort of like keyed into like making sure like we were represented right. I would, take that extra care to like make sure that these skin tones or these like, to model the hair a certain way. And so I feel like, diversity and representation, in the industry is hugely important. And I think people see that. And I think it's good for business, quite frankly. I don't like, so, I mean, there's one thing, so I have some friends, they're of Mexican descent, and they work at a game company that worked on the 2K NBA 2K franchise. And recently, when all the riots were, all the protests were happening this summer, they one of my buddies, who's the art director, he was like, "Hey, we're going to release this content pack that has like BLM shirts, and we're gonna put BLM all on the courts and everything." And I mean, it was amazing. Like I just felt so great and awesome about like how my community, was coming together and like representing and like had my back. But then like never read the comments. So like, and so I remember reading it was a Kotaku. I forget which, there was an article, a game article. And in the comments, it was, social justice warrior. Like they're not genuine. Like this is a ploy or whatever. And it's like, Black people play games too. Like Black people like this isn't just, like this business model, like it works. Like if you show that you care for the people who are playing the game, like they're going to buy into your game, right? And I felt it was like, like it made me think a lot about like where the industry has gone and how far it needs to go, and just how things are perceived culturally about the industry. But yeah, I mean, I would have loved that article to actually show some of the people, because I know that there were other people of diversity on that team and help make those decisions to do that. And I would love that article to show those people and show those faces to kind of buttress like, hey, like we, this isn't coming from some sort of corporate, entity to like try to like pull some sort of lever, right? These are people who are working in this industry that have these feelings, and it's larger than your cynicism. So yeah, I think I think inclusion and representation is very important.
Absolutely. Carmen, we haven't heard from you yet. How do you feel?
Oh gosh, I have so much to say about this, but I'll do my best to be brief. Um, I think that, like, first of all, I have to say that after working in games and entertainment for, I think, like 8 years, when I started at this one studio and saw that Lauren was working there, that was the first time that I ever worked with another Black person and with a Black woman. And I was like, this is so awesome. Um, and I think that, like Lauren was saying, while we were at that studio, we did a lot of work to be visible and create opportunities for aspiring game devs, especially Black game devs. And there was a moment towards the end of my time there that was just truly heartbreaking, where we did so much work to set up these channels. And during the recruitment process for a team that I was working on, someone gave me the line of like, well, we would love to hire more Black talent, but we just can't find it because it doesn't exist. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, that's so untrue, because we've already set up the pipelines and everything. And I think for me, that was an eye-opening moment, kind of echoing what Evan said. Honestly, I think that we've gotten to the point where the words representation and diversity don't mean anything. And I think that for a lot of people, they don't understand like the scope of what it means when we say that it's important to represent people who don't have a voice, like Black people. Like, Black people are not a special interest group. We're a race of people. Like, if you're a white person, think about all the white people all over the world in different countries, and think about how many of them that you don't know. It's the same thing for Black people. Like, my partner is Nigerian and my cousins are from Ghana, and I don't know anything about those cultures except for what I learned from them. But to somebody on like a games team or something, that we're all just Black people, right? And I think that that's an important distinction to make. Like, Africa is not a country, it's a continent, and there's there's such a big difference between the different cultures, not just for Black cultures, but for other minority cultures as well. And I think that, especially for myself, I'm at the point where I'm tired of asking people to consider representing us in the games. And I'm like, let's make our own studio, let's make our own games, and we'll change the industry that way. Because I think that people, like larger companies, are going to follow the money, right? And there are so many people who have a voice now that didn't before. Like for context, like my mom was marching with Dr. King. My grandparents were in had to go in Black only restrooms and stuff like that. That was not that long ago. Like that was yesterday, right? And I think that for some people, they think, oh, we figured racism out. And I think that what I hope to see is that real progress happens when we stop trying to negotiate with those people and we say, this is the future. We are giving a voice to people who didn't have one before. And if you don't like it, then this isn't the place for you and you need to get out. And I think that's where it is right there, right? Like, I think that there are so many people who are creating a new way for themselves and new opportunities in terms of content creators and streamers. And I love that there are new avenues for people to build a name for themselves. And I hope that 5 years from now, we can all think of folks who've made an impact. Like who's like the Black Neil Druckmann, like somebody on that level, who is the Latinx person on that level, who's someone from the queer community on that level. But I don't think that there is a pathway of advancing to that level by like working through a company. It's something we're going to have to make on our own. Yeah, he's not the best example. He's the first one that came to mind, but you know what I mean. Like somebody who has name recognition. But yeah, so I really wish that representation and diversity didn't become sort of marketing opportunities, because they really like lost the meaning. And I think there are a lot of people who unfortunately are really ignorant and they don't understand what those terms mean. And one last thing I'll say is in terms of representation in the games themselves, I think that especially after a lot of the BLM movement started to gain traction last year, we saw a lot of developers say, well, let's have a Black protagonist, or let's like put more Black people in the game, or more Black hairstyles. And my personal thing about that is like, well, I don't want to see that if you don't have any Black people on your dev team, right? Like, I want you to figure out your internal problem first before you're trying to cash in on putting Black people on your cover. And then, you know, on Twitter, be like, hashtag BLM, but you're not hiring any new Black people. You know, I think that's really hypocritical and something that really triggers me about that I'm pretty passionate about. But I can go on about this all day, but I'll leave it there.
Well, actually, I think it's a perfect segue to the next question, Carmen, which, what does it mean for the products of game development when there are Black developers on the team? And is it always situational? And you mentioned a little bit working with Lauren and how great that was. So can you maybe explain that a little bit more and talk about that a little bit more? I mean, how many times have you been on a team where there have been other Black people, or was that the only situation?
Unfortunately, working with Lauren was the only time that I worked with another Black person, even at Wizards of the Coast. But you know, now that I'm a producer on this team, I have hiring power, so hopefully I'm going to change that. But I will say that I think that it shouldn't be our job to be an advocate for our entire race. Like that is craziness, right? But I think there are a few people who select to take on that burden. I'm one of those people, and I really want to make sure that I'm representing an authentic voice, and also I'm representing various different aspects of Black culture. So I'm a Black American, but as I mentioned before, there are so many other Black cultures out there. So when I've worked on teams in the past as a writer or as a designer, I've tried to incorporate aspects of those different cultures into the games that I'm working on. It's been a fight to get those in, let me tell you. But when you win those fights, it's worth it, because being able to see the way that you're able to improve somebody's day or improve somebody's life by having them represented in something that they really care about, that's there's no better feeling than that. And I think that's kind of why we all do it.
Mayet, if I can jump in a little, just real
absolutely.
quick. I think the other thing is, and not to indict the purpose and of this panel, but like, we talk about race and representation and what it means to like be in these predominantly white spaces or non-black spaces, whatever. Like it consumes so much oxygen that we don't talk about craft. Like we're not sitting here talking about your training, as an artist, or Lauren's training as an artist. We're not talking about like Richard's, critique and theory around game design. We're not talking about any of that stuff. And I'm not saying, again, that's not to indict this panel, but like this happens all the time. Like when I started writing comics, or I get interviewed about this kind of stuff all the time, and it's like, well, what's it like to do it and be black? I'm like, well, being black is just being human. So, but like, of course, it's not as simple as that. But like, you don't get to talk about craft and skill development and career development. And I think, again, that's something you lose, or you have to fight extra hard for, the opportunity to talk about how you do the job, not just what it's like to do the job as a black person. And it's again, it puts a chilling effect on how the whole arc of your development as a professional can happen. Because I know there's a person on a project, senior person on a project that I consulted on, who's a black guy who had some visibility when I was starting out as a journalist. So he would talk about this stuff all the time. And he said, I'm not talking about it anymore because I've been that guy. I don't feel like I have anything new to say. And also, I just want to do my job, And to the point where like, I was like, yo, I didn't even know you were still in the industry anymore. But he's like, yeah, I'm just trying to do my job, and not that other job, which I wasn't getting paid for.
Yeah, I can speak to some of that as well. I don't have any stats in front of me, but in a conversation recently with a publisher for comic books, somebody remarked that there is an influx of comics with people of color characters that are put into it, but then the vast majority of that is from writers who aren't of color, right? Just white people putting in people of color just as a character on the cover, kind of like a marketing thing. And most of the writers aren't of color at all. So to that point, becoming your own company, making your own game, writing your own stories, that's a really important thing for to see more quality and authentic representation. I know with myself, like my standards are so high and also so different that I just have to do it myself. And the team that I built around me, and my brothers are part of it, and a lot of people that have been with my community for a long time, like we're just in it because we kind of believe in quality game design, and we focus a lot on community and teaching. So I'm part of that startup, and I'm part of another Black-owned startup. And we were the ones who were mentioned on the Humble Bundle Black Game Dev Fund, the first round of companies that were funded. So that's another interesting thing, right? Just trying to do it ourselves for a change, and have it be a significant part of the creative direction just come from people of color. I see part of the problem as a two-part thing. One, people of color trying to gain representation, trying to get their voice heard, just trying to get a fair shot or a chance, or when they're represented, it to be quality, authentic, constructive, all those things. And like was said before, the second problem is quality, right? We're not talking about craft, we're not talking about technique, we're not talking about method. And I feel that half the time when a lot of independents try to take the projects into their own hands and make them, they're missing a significant amount of like experience and training and craft, and those two things kind of go together for the ultimate artistic product to kind of speak and represent them and carry their voice. So those are two very difficult problems to juggle, and they both need to be done together.
Absolutely. Michael, I've seen you nodding your head a lot about what does it mean for there to be other Black developers on the team. I'm actually going to throw in another question. It's a little bit different, but it has to do with that and having other people in the team and having mentors. And I wanted to hear what you thought about that, Michael.
Me?
Smitty, I'm sorry, Smitty.
That's all right. Like, it's like my mom only calls me Michael. All right. No, it's yeah, I mean, I think that's super important. I think, you know, so I, much like a lot of the panel, have not worked with a lot of other African Americans as well. But I have worked with, I remember in 2000, I worked with a young woman of Asian descent, and she was like the only woman, and she was the artist, the only woman in the company. And she was fresh out of school. And I felt, because of my experience, that it was my job to like, you know, show her the ropes and be very sort of protective and mentor her in that way. And because like I know how hard it was for me being different, being other, coming into the industry. And you know, long story short, like I think like almost 20 years later, she hired me. She was my first art director at Zynga. She hired me because she remembered me, and she like told me like how much she appreciated, how much she needed like that voice, because it was hard for her. It was hard, like there were inside jokes that she kind of couldn't be a part of, and and I've experienced that, you know, the jokes that you kind of smirk at, and you know, I was, you know, ashamedly, you know, I've sort of smirked at those jokes and walked away because I felt like I had to not be seen as difficult in the, you know, in the company. And so, you know, and so we bonded. And I think having mentorship is super important, even if it's at your company or at another company, or, you know, in the community. That's why I think this, you know, this talk and this program is like super important, I think, to like make those connections. Yeah.
Yeah, Donald, actually, I was looking at you too. You're next. I was wondering what your experiences were, and actually, did you even have a mentor? And if you did, you know, is that something that you're trying to generate and create with ATX Games?
Yeah, that's so. Back in the day, God, man, I'm old. Back in the day when I was trying to get into the games industry, the mentors that I had were white. Like, I didn't have a black mentor. I can't even think of someone back then in that time frame that could have been a mentor. Like, I can't even think of a name that was black and that could have been a mentor. And now you're exactly right. And so that's a lot of what I am trying to create with ATX Game Makers. Now, ATX Game Makers itself is a big broader than just Black, right? So with ATX Game Makers, I'm going into all untapped resources and marginalized people. So and like Mio's there helping me out, and we have a bunch of different folks that are putting themselves out there to help people be mentors and things of that nature. But I also wanted to circle back on a couple of things that Evan had said earlier when you were saying, you know, one of the things that makes you upset is when people put in BLM or Black people into their games, and then you go look and there's like no Black people that work there. And the very first thing that came to my mind was like, that also ties into the initial
That was
question.
Carmen, but I too hate that.
Oh, my bad.
Please continue.
My bad. One of the things I was looking at, and that's probably why I got who said it wrong. So I started looking up Watch Dogs 2. And I don't know if anybody played Watch Dogs 2, but I remember when I started playing this game, I was like, so for those of you who don't know, the lead actor or the lead protagonist in the game is a young Black man who is very intelligent, into tech, and is a nerd. So basically, all the people on this panel, and I'm just like, holy crap! Like, I remember the first time playing this and thinking, God, this feels like it was made for me. Like I can really get into it. And then I go and I look, and it's like, yeah, the designers, the writers, and just like nobody, you know, it's just kind of let me down on that part. But I think, and I'm sorry for kind of meandering the point. I'm going last, so I was like, I gotta get in all my points.
We
One of
still
the
have
important
Lauren.
things.
You're not last. We still have
Oh, my
Lauren.
bad. I'm sorry, Lauren. I didn't mean to overlook you. One of the things I think is very important about having a diverse team, though, is that you get diverse products in the end, right? So ideally, we will get more video games where I'm not playing a 30-year-old, unclean shaven white dude going to save the world. Maybe I can play more Black people going to save the world. You know, that's or hearing these stories or playing these stories in different narratives from very different cultures. That's why it's so important for me to have a more diverse team, so we get more chances of having diverse games to play.
Absolutely. And actually, I don't know that we have heard from Evan yet either, but Lauren, what about you in terms of what does it mean to have other Black developers on a team, and that question about mentorship?
It means a lot, actually. And a perfect example of it is actually when I worked with Carmen. The game that we were working on, every February, we would always do a Valentine's Day event. And when Carmen came on as designer, he proposed that we do a Black History Month event. And a lot of people had realized, they were like, oh, like that would be great. Oh, we don't really have that many Black characters in the game that we're working on. And they're just like, oh, like they just started to come to this realization of just like, oh, like why weren't we doing this? And being able to share the load of, you know, not being the only one to have to pitch these ideas or to say these kinds of things, or to make everybody aware that, hey, maybe this is an important thing that we could represent, is it takes a lot of the burden off. And we obviously share that burden, but instead of having, you know, the whole world on your shoulders, you have like half of it now. And that makes a lot of difference. It helps to alleviate that. And also it helps you to get a safe space where you find other people like you, and you can talk about issues that nobody else will understand. And, you know, I think that's really helpful to be able to have that. In terms of mentorship, you know, I also haven't really had, you know, any Black mentors either. Some of them have tried. You know, there was a woman who I worked with that wasn't in game development at all, and she attempted it, but, you know, it was a matter of understanding where an artist comes from versus somebody who has like a more logical oriented, you know, mind and workplace and everything. It's just a big difference. And so, you know, I've never been able to find another Black artist who could actually mentor me, because there's a lot of specific things about this role that is really important to understand. You know, imposter syndrome, going back to the first question, is a big one. I don't know any artist who hasn't been through imposter syndrome. And it's a huge thing that a lot of people don't understand. And to be able to talk to a Black person who could go through that same thing and, you know, talk me through it and to build me up and how they work through it, you know, it would be really meaningful, but I haven't gotten to have that. But, you know, instead we've had to a lot of times rely on our own strength and our own, you know, ability to kind of cope with all these things in this industry, as, you know, a person who is mostly alone in a lot of these struggles. And we end up getting resilient to it, but we don't realize the amount of burden that we have to take with us every single day. And, you know, until we are suddenly just like sitting and realizing how burnt out we actually are, you know, we kind of just carry it, and it's in the back burner in the back of our minds. And we don't notice it until we have a chance to unload ourselves. And so, you know, it is a big thing, but I think, you know, the more Black people, or the more people of color, or, you know, queer people, or just the more diverse a studio is, you know, the less of that burden that everybody has to carry, and just you can spread it around and talk about these issues and have a much more understanding team, and a much more, you know, inclusive team and equitable team. Because I think it's less about, you know, diversity and just more about equity, that people of different experiences and walks of life can actually have a feeling of belonging in different ways, because that's what we'll need. We don't come from the same place. We don't have the same experiences. And to have a team that understands how diverse and different people's thinking is, that means a lot of difference, and that makes a lot of change happen. So yeah.
Absolutely. And it is exhausting. It's very exhausting.
Yeah.
Evan, how about you? Because once again, you are a writer. Are there more Black or African American or just people of color, period, writers that you found that you've worked with? Or is it kind of the same thing? And have you had a mentor?
No and no. Um, yeah. I mean, I know the only other two Black narrative designers I know, like, we're friends because it's like, all right, well, I guess we're the only ones. We should know each other. Um, uh, and the same thing, for journalism. Like, I was thinking back about my career as a journalist and a critic. Like, I I think I was the only Black man to write a Kotaku, like, on staff. There's been freelancers, and there's been Black women, more than one, thank God. Uh, and that's not to like cast aspersions on my time there or anything like that, but like, you know, uh, and I was the first face a lot of people saw, doing that kind of work. Blackface, I should say, Black male face. Um, so what happens then is like the two Black women that wound up working there like reached out to me, and I call myself their blog father because like you know I can't say I was materially like responsible for them getting their jobs, but like just showing that it was possible, like what was something that they communicated to me, like was not like an awareness they had before. So yeah, it's weird to be operating in a space like this, like video games, or any other pop culture medium, and not have the benefit of the social networks, um, uh, that allow for mentorship and career development. Um, it is uh it's a hard fight, like, especially someone like me. I'm a consultant, so like, oh, guess what, this studio works different than this other studio, and you've got to, kind of hit the ground running and figure out what the best practices are, or what the quirks and idiosyncrasies are. It is very, very tricky, um to navigate that stuff without the benefit of like an institutional or historical, like, repository that you can draw on. But like, look, I'm old enough to like start thinking about like, okay, what am I leaving behind? What, like what material things will people who come after me be able to point at and be like, okay, because Evan did this X, Y, and Z is easier. And that's why, as exhausting as February can be in this regard, I got 4 more panels this month, and we're already halfway through. But like, I tell myself, well, if I don't do it and people don't see me, um, will they even know? You know, and that's not to make myself sound like some kind of special prophet, or anything like that. But like, you realize the instances you don't realize the impact that you have and your visibility has on people, um, until it comes back to you in the ways like Lauren has said and Carmen has said, um, um, and Smitty said about the person he mentored. So it's a very tricky paradigm to exist inside of. Um, yeah.
Well, I think we have time for one more kind of round of a question before we get into questions from the audience. And I kind of wanted to build upon what we've already talked about kind of navigating and being the only person of color in a group, which I too have experienced many times. So how do you navigate that where kind of your personal life and your professional life intersect, right? You know, are they separated? Do you like put them in compartments? when you're at work versus when you're with your friends or at home? Or is that something that you allow to bleed together? I'm going to start with Smitty.
Sorry. Oh yeah, I code switch all the time. Like I'm from the DC area, and you know I talk very. If I was to, I'm talking in my office voice now, but I'm very. I'm like, man, this joint over here is they be tripping over there, just lunching, right? Like that's just how everybody be at work, you know. But you know, I have to speak a certain way when I'm at work. When I'm at home, I speak a certain way. I definitely separate parts of my personality. I think we all do that to some extent. So yeah, man, DMV, yeah, baby. But yeah, I mean, you know, but I still wear my Timberlands at work. You know, I still wear my J's. You know, I try, you know, because I want to be me, right? But I think, you know, but I also want to project professionalism. And so for that, you know, I definitely feel like there is some separation. But you know, when I'm in groups, you know, I try to be genuine. I don't ever want to come off as, you know, fake or fraudulent or playing a certain role, right? But I feel like it's important for me to show others that might not be familiar with, you know, our culture, or you know, or like I'm the only Black person. Like I've heard people tell me I've worked with that I'm the only Black person they met. Like I had a person tell me, like, write me this during the summer of protest, write me this long letter saying that she was from West Virginia, that I was the first Black person she had ever met, and that I changed her outlook on African Americans, which was like crazy to me, like that, because I've
what was
never
her outlook?
people. What would you say?
What was her outlook?
Lauren is sad.
It was good. It was good. It was good.
Okay, so you just made it better. You were a value add. Okay, that's good. We're not gonna kick you out.
But yeah, so no, I think you know, so I feel like, you know, I try to represent in a good way. And I think someone also on the panel had mentioned this, was saying that you know, they don't want to be the reason why they never hire another Black person. Right. So I feel like that pressure is there as well.
Carmen, what about you?
Sorry, you caught me off guard. No, I think that I'm trying to decide how open I want to be about this. Well, I mean, for me, like, I think
you're about to code switch, and the code switching question is what you're gonna do.
Yeah,
make it meta. Go ahead.
I come from like a really lower class family, and I think that when I was growing up, I learned to code switch just to exist in society. And eventually it got to the point where my persona became my personality. And I'm also a person who constantly struggles with depression. And I think that dealing with the trauma that comes along with code switching, along with the trauma that you get from working in entertainment and in games, I think that the thing for me that works best is I'm fortunate enough to have really loving and supportive friends. I think that, you know, I've made lots of mistakes. Sometimes those mistakes were in my professional life, and sometimes those were in my personal life. And I think that my friends being there to support me and to allow me to learn and grow from those things, it has been really helpful.
Absolutely. Donald, how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, there's a degree, like it's been said earlier, there's definitely a little bit of change in there, but like for me personally, the most part, I'm a big goofball, and
Shocker.
You know, yeah, like I just am who I am, and anybody who knows me will tell you, yeah, I act pretty much the same at work as I do anywhere else. And I think a large part of that was just like once I became comfortable, I became comfortable. Like I'm like, this is who I am. This is where I come from. These are the jokes that I make. Yeah, this is the way I talk. So, but if I'm nervous about a certain event or certain thing, I will switch it up a little bit and get that. Well, yes, Mr. Smith, I am so glad to meet you. Blah blah blah. You know, I'll switch it up a little bit, but for the most part, no. Once I get comfortable in a conference room, I'm cutting up, I'm acting up. I'm like, oh, what what Nikes you got on? You know, whatever the case.
We lost you a bit, Donald. We lost you.
Am I back?
Yes, now you're back.
I'm just saying, I'm a goofball. That's it.
Well, Evan, how about yourself?
I originally wasn't going to answer this question because I want to
Okay.
go to Q&A. No, I said originally. I will say this, like, code switching as a phenomenon happens out of necessity, right? You know, the precursor to code switching is a bunch of negative stereotypes and attitudes about Black people and other marginalized people that we have to work around, right? So the tricky thing is how do you do it in a way where you don't feel like you're diminishing yourself, you know, like Donald and Smitty were saying, like, yeah, you want to be yourself. You want to throw out your accent, you know, when you feel comfortable. You want to goof around and joke, but at the same time, you know, the danger of that is, okay, because I'm rocking my accent, my DMV accent, or I'm being a goofball at work, are they going to think less of me because of, oh, well, you're just cooning, or you're just, you know, you're just showing that you come from a lower income experience, which not necessarily be the case, but like you're being yourself. And the danger that is posed to us is when you're being yourself, you know, people may attach that behavior to stereotypes that they haven't bothered to reckon with. So that said, yeah, I code switch, you know, but I think, you know, the reasons that we have to code switch are worth examining too. You know, like when you feel like you have to do it, when you feel like you can do it, and when you feel like you have to do it.
Absolutely. And I think we can hear from one more of the panelists before we have to break and go to questions. Lauren, I'm actually interested to hear what you have to say, because once again, you're the only female besides myself, but I'm not on the panel.
Yeah, it's a very familiar experience with me, you know, code switching and having to adjust myself for the more professional setting. But really, I've always been kind of the oddball out where I grew up anyway. I was in a predominantly Black suburb, and I was always just this little nerd in this corner drawing, and would be made fun of by my family for talking too white because the words that I spoke were too enunciated or eloquent, or it's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. These notions are harmful, and it's from the society that we've had to adjust to as well. So I don't blame anybody for putting that on me, but at the same time, I can't say it hasn't like served me to just be like this, because some people will hear me talking on the phone, they won't know I'm Black, but at the same time, like there is a much more professional voice that I adopt depending on who I have to talk to, especially after I left my old studio. One of the CEOs had reached out to me to ask about my experience at that studio being a Black person. And when I talked to her, like the experience that I felt was like almost an out of body experience, where I just I felt like I rose above my head and became this other person who just expressed all my points, but in a way that was, Evan, Evan's got an interruption. He's like, oh, bye, Evan. But I had to talk to her in a way that was, I really wanted to express my truth, but I wanted to almost sound like I was like somebody who was her peer, which was a really weird experience to have. And that was a code switching of the highest degree. to pretend like I was so high up the chain that I was an executive. But then I thought, I'm like, why can't I be that? Like, why can't I be that? But I don't necessarily like it. I want to be myself. I want to be the goofy person. I'm also very goofy, and I'm just a ball of affection. I just love hugs, and I love nerding out about the cute things that I nerd out about. But like when I am at work and I am a manager, I have to present a much more like serious, firm kind of persona. And so I've had to find a balance between the two, especially as a woman. Like, in order to be taken seriously as a Black woman, it takes a lot of effort. And part of it is being authentic. And the other part of it is, like, I'm like, here's my play persona and here's my work persona. And when I have to switch on my work persona, it's time to work, and you need to know it's time to work. You need to know to take me seriously, and you need to know to listen to my voice. And so I've been able to switch that persona on more effectively as I've gotten more experience. But again, it's just another facet of how exhausting it is to work in this industry, when you have to be conscious of how you switch it, and you have to be conscious of how it's coming off to other people. You don't want to do too much and then rock the boat, but you don't want to do too little and then people trample over you. So, it's a balance, like walking a tightrope a lot of the time. But I'm learning to navigate it a little bit easier every day. But I am really excited about the day that I don't have to navigate it anymore, because it's just okay to be the person that I am. I don't know when that will happen, but trying to make that world a better place. That's all I can do.
Well, I mean, we can hope that it'll happen someday. We can hope for it. John, I'm going to hand it over to you briefly.
Okay, well, I'm just going to call that right now is 8:39. Take out your timepieces and count 10 minutes from now. We will have an intermission, and we'll come back with Q&A with the panel. Thank you much. All right, we are back, and we are here with our panel. So everyone who has questions, be ready to use the raise hand function of Zoom. And anyone who doesn't have a microphone or doesn't want to voice their question and maybe not put their name to it, please message myself or Mayet, and we will raise it for you. But back to Mayet.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I want to reintroduce our panelists for those people who might have been arrived a little bit late. So we have Michael D. Smith, known as Smitty. He is the lead UX UI designer for Zynga's Game of Thrones slots casino game based in Austin. GoT Slots launched last year and has done very well, winning the EKG Slot Award for Best Social Slots Game in 2019. His career started in animation, continued into learning apps such as Rosetta Stone and Pearson, and has followed entirely into user interface for games. Richard Kirby Kid Terrell is the founder and CEO of DesignerOriented.net, a company that teaches game design through a unique combination of play, critique, and community. He created the game Enlight 10, Learn, the Art of Learning, and worked as a combat designer at Remnant from the Ashes. He wrote over 1 million words on his game design blog, criticalgaming.com. Carmen Eskerniz Jr., Carmen, I apologize if I mispronounced your last name, is a producer, is a producer for Wizards of the Coast. Carmen is also a producer, writer, and designer of games and comics. He's also the dungeon master for the tabletop actual play show, Realms and Roleplay. Lauren Brown is an Emmy Award-winning artist who is currently working as an associate art director at Zynga in Austin. She has 10 years of experience between the games and animation industries, working on television series such as Archer on FX, The League, and Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Evan Narcisse writes for and about video games, comic books, and TV. His work has appeared in The Atlantic, Time Magazine, Kotaku, Ionine, and The New York Times. He wrote The Rise of the Black Panther graphic novel for Marvel Comics, the Genlock animated series, and served as a narrative design consultant on Marvel's Spider-Man, Miles Morales. A native New Yorker, he now lives in Austin, Texas. Donald Harris is an executive producer at Farbridge. His career has taken him from Titanfall to Goldman Sachs and everywhere in between. Donald enjoys growing and leading business development, project management, and product development teams. Getting to combine amazing people with great technology is what gets him out of bed in the morning, always on the hustle to make experiences that inspire, entertain, and take you away from your everyday life. Please welcome back our panel, and we are here to take your questions.
All right, we got one. John Lyle.
Yes, hello. Thank you all for doing this. I really appreciate this. It's been amazing so far. I'm a YouTuber and a writer, and I'm aspiring game developer. I work in education, so I'm trying to marry my fields together into a game. And I have a lot of questions that I'd like to ask, more substantive than what I'm about to ask, because I feel like it's going to take a while. But I will ask, I do want to know, I'm curious, what character trait, like individual character trait that you all have, do you think has served you best in game development? I'm thinking specifically as you guys have mentioned, navigating predominantly white spaces. What character trait has served you best?
I'm gonna go first because I'm gonna be real quick. Curiosity.
I'll follow that up with passion. I wanted to be in games. That's the only thing I wanted.
I'll follow that up with determination. I don't let rules stop me, or I don't let restrictions stop me. I always find a way to do what I want to do.
Anyone else? John?
Yeah, I just want to say, I guess being open-minded. I started off wanting to be a designer, but there wasn't an opportunity to do that, so I did something else instead and eventually worked my way there. It's just being open to opportunities.
Next, we have Molly. Is that how I pronounce your name?
Mally, but
Mally,
like I
I'm
said,
sorry. You
nobody
said it
gets it right the
before.
first time.
Sorry, Mally.
No, it's all good. It's all good. So Carmen mentioned earlier about after that horrible, heartbreaking quote of "There's not Black talent out there," which we all know is false, about pipelines that you guys had set up, and I was just kind of curious what those were and how other companies could start to kind of adopt those and build those into their hiring practices.
Yeah, Lauren could probably speak to this too, but during our time working at the studio we were working for, we did a lot of outreach with, oh gosh, I think it's like American Youth Works is what it's called.
Yeah, American Youth Works.
Yeah, they're a really awesome organization. A lot of the folks who go through the program are working on getting their GED or working toward a higher education. And a lot of those folks normally don't get the kinds of opportunities to go visit tech companies and have access, but they're super talented people. And their curriculum there, by the time they finish, they're like super well-trained professionals ready to just start in the workplace from day one. So working with them, working with Thinkery, with other colleges around town, like Houston Tillotson and UT, as well as Texas State, which is a little further away, but we were able to also do some outreach with out-of-state schools like Georgia Tech. So creating those pipelines where we know the students are and creating an opportunity for them to come visit a studio and learn what it's like to work every day in games was a way for us to sort of get people in front of hiring managers quickly.
One thing I would, if I can jump in, I'm sorry.
Oh.
So, and this might be a plug, but so I went to the Art Institute of Philadelphia. And when I was working in the DC area, and in some other spots, I would visit those Art Institute locals and try to encourage those people. I found that at the companies I worked at Bethesda, and I worked at some other companies, and they look at large universities. They're like, we're going to look at Micah. We're going to look at, even at Zynga, we do a lot of programs with UT, but we don't look at like, these are expensive universities. When I would go visit and speak at the Art Institute, I think I would see a lot of diversity there. And I'm not saying that I think it's easier to get into those schools. In terms of, now, I feel like the pipelines are still very sort of like, you need a degree, a master's in art. You need this, you need that. I've worked for plenty of art directors that did not go to school, that were self-taught. I met with plenty of like 3 artists that taught themselves ZBrush. I feel like the industry is still in this, it's a weird mindset. And like, I think people learn nowadays in different ways. There are a lot of like people who are self-taught, and like, especially from an art standpoint, they like learn a lot on YouTube or whatever. And I don't think we're focusing on people and their talent. We're focusing on titles and certificates and degrees. And not to say that that's excluding a lot of minorities or people of color, but I feel like it contributes to some degree.
That actually goes directly into our next question, and Sean, will get to you after this question from the chat. So we have this from Ronald Arthur, and he asks, what was everyone's path educationally, high school and beyond? HBCU or PWI major or certifications experiences that landed the first job in gaming?
Just so yeah, I didn't go to college or any of that. I sort of brute forced my way into the industry.
Because you're 6'8".
Also that. But no, actually what I did is, so I had a career in sales, and I just flipped that career into the games industry. I figured out, what can a salesman do in the games industry? And one of the first jobs that I got was selling game engines for a company called Garage Games. And so that was my foot in the door. And there, some people tell you, oh, you can get in by going through QA. That's not the only way. And going through QA is not a bad way either. But personally, that's how I did it. I just stayed once I got here.
My path is a little unconventional. I went to school, college, and got a degree in creative writing. So it's no wonder that I wrote like the biggest blog on game design on the net. Writing comes easily to me, and that's something that I use to understand game design. So I wrote article after article to teach myself. And then from there, that's how I made a few contacts. Went to GDC and decided to team up and work on a game together, and that turned into my first published title. So a lot of it's self-taught, right? Especially with game design, especially at that time, there weren't many or any schools teaching game design specifically. And because of that, a lot of what you will find in the industry nowadays are people who have been working at their companies, a little older now, and when they go to interview you, they do not have quite the scaffolding, the structure, the rigor, the language to kind of test you. They don't have a really good way of understanding what kind of a designer you are. Even if you've made games, they don't play them, right? Games take a while to play, and they can be quite complicated and quite diverse. So that's kind of an interesting problem for game designers. But after my first indie title, then I worked on my own game on my own, and then I got a job at Gunfire. So a couple of different types of jobs, but all starting with, if you show them the passion and the dedication and you've worked hard for it, that's kind of what they want to see.
Yeah, my path was that I always knew I wanted to be an artist. Since I was little, I loved cartoons, loved video games and everything like that. And I originally thought that I was going to be an animator, but college burned that out of me pretty quickly and realized that illustration was much better for me. So I went to Savannah College of Art and Design for grad school, which is a really good school. Oh my goodness, it's expensive. It's very, very expensive. Paying off those loans. But I ended up going into the animation department and just drawing in there instead, and ended up getting recruited for a bunch of people's student films. And I realized that that was a really good way of getting a taste of what the industry actually looked like. And so I ended up working on 9 of them. And then I got my first job shortly out of school at Floyd County Productions, which is where I worked on Archer, and started as a background artist, which was different than what I originally thought. But it was a good foray into learning how to do character design, learning how to do layout art. And so a big thing I'll say is that the thing that you think your career might be leading you towards will definitely, like, can and will change pretty easily from how you start getting, like you've already heard from other people. So, you know, it's really interesting of how, like, where it takes you. When I first got into the industry, I never thought that I was leadership material or I could be a manager. I just never even imagined that for me. And one of the art directors had actually asked me if I wanted to lead a team. And I was just like, well, I guess I should try it. So I ended up saying yes to it. And because of that, when my friend moved over to the studio that I worked at when I first came to Austin, he reached out to me and told me, he's like, you would be a good lead environment artist. Like, you already do that basically at your studio. And I'm like, well, yeah, might as well. You know, I figure I don't have anything to lose, so I could apply and just see what happens. And then 2 months later, I was leaving Atlanta. So, you know, it was just because I was just willing to put myself out there and willing for, like, just to take that shot, even if I didn't know or I wasn't sure if I was qualified for it. I just did it anyway. And that's pretty much exactly what happened at Zynga too. So it's the double-handed thing of, you know, apply anyway, even if you don't know if you're qualified fully for a job. Just you never know what will happen, so might as well just try it anyway. And the second hand is be a really good person to work with. Be very, you know, a good team player, somebody who actually can communicate, somebody who is good at expressing their ideas, and somebody who makes other people confident that you'd be good to work at any other studio with them. Because you never know who will show up in the most unexpected places. I guarantee you. I feel like I've been in the weirdest places, and somebody who I knew just like was just there. And I'm like, what are you doing here? I'm in a whole nother state and you're here. This is weird. But it's all to say that make a good reputation for yourself. It's one of the most important things because this world is very, very small. So the best thing I can say.
Absolutely. Now, I've been told that actually Luis is first. I'm so sorry, Sean. Luis had his hand up for a while. So I'd like to give the floor to him.
Such disrespect, I tell you.
So sorry.
Just kidding. I'm just kidding. So my question is super weird. It's kind of more of what is your opinion on it? And let me start off with a little background here. I am a light brown man, probably the lightest you'll ever get, but I have been in a diversity hire before. And I have had I guess, I've had people of my ethnicity tell me, hey, you should tell them that you're Mexican and you're Puerto Rican and that you should be out there. I should fly my big Puerto Rican flag like every other Puerto Rican in the world. I don't want to do that. And I never wanted to do that. So I've always pushed myself as I'm an artist. I'm damn good at what I do. So how do y'all feel about doing things because of the color of your skin? Like, is it important that I keep doing it? As I mentioned in the comments earlier, I do it because it's not about me. Like the little brown boys and little brown girls out there that are like, I need this. I want a role model. I'll be the role model. I hate the center of attention, even though I want to be the center of attention. So anyways, that's what I'm trying to ask, I think.
I want to say, you know, Luis, don't do anything that's not authentic to you. If you want to take on that burden, then by all means do it. I'll definitely tell you to do it if that's something that you want to do and that's something that's in your heart, right? I think, and well, no, I won't say that. For me personally, the reason why I do it and the reason why I kind of have that banner, and I definitely do wear that banner, is because it's a passion of mine, because it's something that I'm actively trying to take on and change in the industry. That being said, it doesn't make you bad for not wanting to do that or anything like that. Like, please don't take it that way. But just from my opinion, I'm like, don't do anything that's not authentic to yourself. Like, if you're not riding around your neighborhood with your flag out and saying, hey, I am this, that, or the other, it's gonna seem off when you try and do it, you know, for show, I guess, or whatnot. So that's my personal opinion. I don't know.
Yeah, for me, I think it's a thing of power to be able to embrace my identity. Even though originally when I first started in the industry, I really didn't want to be known as, you know, the Black female artist. I just wanted to be known as an artist as well. But then I realized how powerful it was for me to see anybody who looked like me doing the things that I wanted to do. And from that point on, I wanted to kind of represent that for myself as well as I became, you know, higher and higher in the industry. And here's an example of like just like the power that I felt it had. When I was watching the movie Hidden Figures, at the very end, they were doing the epilogue and saying that, you know, how these women who had worked so hard to be in the position that we're in, what they did like after they found success in their industry was they turned around and then helped other people get to where they were. And I was like, that's the kind of spirit that I want to embody. And I think that embodying that is a lot easier when you embrace that identity and you're able to then say, speak from that place of, you know, I'm a Black artist who wants other artists to get where I am at right now, who look like me. And, you know, embracing that is a big part of it. And then other people will notice you too and want to elevate your voice because, you know, right now especially, people are really trying to bring us to the forefront. So I think it's really important to be able to embrace it. But if it is a place that's uncomfortable for you, if it's difficult, it is a big burden and it does take a lot of energy. So if you don't want to do that, that's okay. But that's the reason why I do it.
So I was a diversity hire. I know it because my manager told me I was, uh, and it hurt when he first told me. And I, you know, but I think, and this was, I don't know, 20 something years ago. I had got my first job was at Bethesda in Rockville before they blew up, and you know, it made me like every raise or you know, employee of the month or award I've won since then, every promotion, everything, you know, I mean, it made me, you know, work that much harder to prove to myself that, you know, I wasn't a handout. But when I started to look back at the situation, it's like, I've known people who hired their cousin. Like I've worked at companies where their nephew got hired or their, you know, their brother or like their college friend, you know, or I've had art directors that, you know, hired directly from their college program. You know, when I look at the diversity situation, like it's like if you want more diverse people, hire diverse people. It's simple. Like I don't think it is like it's. I think because you know you learn a lot from your first job, like, and I think you know you need experience to have experience. And so I kind of look at it differently now. Like I feel like, you know, yeah, that's how I got my start. But like, if not for that, then what? Right. And you know, I feel like, you know, in terms of, you know, I guess wearing a badge or, you know, being a champion, you know, for diversity or for, you know, a certain ethnicity. I think it's just like, man, just be a good person, be a good employee, be a good, you know, team member, and be a reflection of, you know, who you are and your values and, you know, culturally or not. And I think, you know, people will see that and see that, you know, and then that'll sort of break down some of the walls and barriers and biases and preconceptions that people might have about, you know, your culture. Like, I don't think you have to wave a flag. You just got to be, you know, you just got to be you, but, you know, and just, you know, and I think that'll do a lot. That'll do a lot.
I just wanted to add quickly, when I first started, I most certainly wanted to just be a designer. I wanted to be under the radar. I didn't want any attention because I'd heard stories and read articles about folks who had been harassed and their careers had been essentially ended because of people being prejudiced or racist against them online and stuff. And I think that unfortunately, you mentioned how do you avoid being a diversity hire? I don't think you can avoid that. I think that something that just kind of happens, but I think that as long as you're focusing on your craft and mastering your craft, that's what's most important, and that's how you stand out. For me, the switch happened to where I wanted to be an advocate when I was working at a studio and I was busting my butt, and I noticed that all the Black people that were working there were contractors, and they were hiring white people out of college and having the contractors train the white people who were full-time, and the contracts with black people would expire. And then I was a contractor, and I was like, oh, whoa, hold up now. Like, I've been working all this time and I want to earn full-time or whatever. And so, and in the last question about code switching, I kind of fumbled the story because I wasn't ready, but that was kind of what I meant when I said messing up professionally. I was very vocal about the prejudice that was happening, and that can be career ending because some people say that there's a blacklist and some people say that there isn't, but whether or not there is or there isn't, like speaking out and being vocal about that kind of stuff can really hurt you in the long run. And it wasn't, I mean, I'm still learning, right? And I think that it wasn't until recently that I had any finesse with that at all. So I was very confrontational about it. And I think that that can also be damaging to you. But if you decide that you want to be an advocate, I would say speak to other people who are and learn how to navigate that situation with finesse. And then you can be an awesome in your position and be an awesome advocate at the same time.
All right, excellent. That was excellent. John, who do we have next? Is it Sean?
Yep, Sean, you're up next.
Okay.
Still with us?
Okay. Thanks for this panel. It's awesome. And this question's going to be a little bit of a tease because it's only for the speakers. It's not for the audience. It might be for the audience in the future, but because we're on a panel. You're all on a panel talking about like identity and those important things, and we all talk about how like it's really tiring to do that. And so my question to you is to think about something that you know a lot about, that you'd love to speak about, like something like to your craft that you like to do, that you think you could talk a lot about, and think about that and write a talk proposal.
I was gonna say, yes, see where this is going.
You could submit it to me. You could send it to me, whatever. Like, because actually, one of the key things that I'm here about, because I started my career doing this, right? Like, and I thought it was going to get me somewhere, and it got me basically pigeonholed with everybody wanting to talk to like the black poor kid. So I'm just saying, like, I think, being given the like freedom to just say, I want to write about something and talk about something that I want to talk about, and I want to submit it to a place is important, because I'm sure you're all very brilliant in what you do. But so that's my question to you is like, what do you think you'd want to talk about, and to maybe think about that and like work on something, and also try to find some place that values your talk, what you talk about, to pay you for it.
I don't know, Sean. Maybe I would like to talk about writing legacy characters for game dev of color. Okay, I'm done.
To answer Sean's question, I mean, he knows me, and we kind of go way back, and fortunate enough to hang out with Sean at GDC and at Evo a few times, so that's always fond memories. But I remember even back in the day, Sean was kind of networking with people, trying to get people to speak up, have something to say, and try to get those messages in the right venue. And that's always something that I've been very bad at. But in general, there's a lot to say about design, game design, craft. One thing that's kind of interesting is when I have an open community, a lot of people float in from all those different places that I mentioned before. And some people are just on the cusp of going into the game industry, or picking those classes in college that are towards technology, or thinking about starting a team on their own, or all these different things. And I get to talk to each of them and see where they're coming from, what they're thinking, kind of poke them a little bit to see what their experience base is and what their expectations are. And over the years, get a really clear idea of what the various generations are doing, what they're expecting, and which direction they're moving in. So that's always neat. I think putting things like that into perspective really helps the industry figure out what the next generation is going to be like, because we know what games we're currently making, but not a lot of people have talked to the people that are at the door instead of walking through the door. And those are the kind of things I like to speak about, what their attitudes are, how they're learning, right? The internet is changing every year now, right? With every single website, new platform, social media, piece of technology that comes around. The younger aspiring designers are using these things like it's normal, and we're just sitting there trying to adjust and keep up. So that's always an interesting thing to wrap our heads around. But yeah, those are just the first thing that came to mind.
I think for me, one of the things I'd like to speak on is company culture, because I've been in so many different tech companies. Which ones felt welcoming, which ones definitely didn't feel that way, and ways to go about creating a comfortable, welcoming company culture. That's like we were talking about creating a more diverse team and having more diversity in this industry. And I think a large part of that, like if you step back and you take a look at all the questions that Mayet asked us tonight, it's like all of those combined are just like reasons as to, or each of those can be like a point of like, hey, how are you addressing this inside your company and externally from your company to like make people want to come and work for you, make people want to come and make diverse games. So that's definitely something that I'd be interested in speaking about.
I have a topic that is fresh on my mind because I just did an interview about it. But one of the things that I'm really passionate about, that I love, is just creating more accurate representations of different diverse groups of people in, character creators or just the characters that you design in your games. Because I can probably count on one hand the amount of games that I've seen with authentic representations of natural hair, or like varied enough representations of natural hair. And one of my most recent endeavors at my current game team is that I helped revamp an avatar system that actually like spread out like the actual, like use the hair grading scale to accurately represent all different kinds of textures of hair with like equal amounts of numbers. So it wasn't just one afro and one, set of braids, but there's actually different hairstyles, different sized afros. There's locks, there's Bantu knots, like there's like, all this stuff that's in here. And I was really happy with that work. So that's the topic that is on my mind right now that I would like to speak about.
Lauren, are you aware of Professor Dark's work? A.M. Dark is a professor at UC, I want to say Riverside, but she's building a crowdsourced database of Black natural hairstyles. Yeah, I see that reaction. Are you Googling right now? Yeah, you see it? Yeah.
Well then.
There's also like a bunch of Sims creators who are modding Sims to get black hair in
the Black Summer. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is gonna be a panel. This is gonna be a thing.
As well. Well, excellent. I would like to be on it.
Yeah, no, I'm like hearing you. I was just like, that just was like, okay, all these people have to talk together.
Perfect.
You gotta let me moderate, Sean.
Ronald Arthur is a principal at a K through 5th grade elementary with a STEM focus, and he says we have students in kindergarten and 1st grade coding on Scratch, and if anyone is interested in ever speaking to a diverse school, feel free to email him. And so that's in the chat with his contact information.
I love to talk to your kids.
And just drunk there. I'm from County. Yeah. Me and Michael just were chatting. We're both from the area. And if you ever look purchase, I mean, silly, a full place for African Americans and minorities. Lots of colleges, HBCUs, state university, just create our own animation studio. So.
It's hard to hear you, Ronald. You're breaking up.
So hearing those other stories, thank you. I really appreciate it. I'll put in.
He's gonna put it in the chat. Okay, cool. Yeah. But yeah, he also put his email. So for those of you on the panel who are interested in, yeah, speaking to the kids, like hit him up.
Thank you. Sorry about the AV issues. These things happen. Not your fault.
Do we have any other questions?
We got 2 more hands raised.
More people with their hands
Okay.
up.
I didn't see. Thank you.
Yeah. How about Juan Cruz?
Hi, can everybody hear me?
You're good.
Yes.
All right. First, I want to thank you all for this panel. It's been really great, and I think it's really necessary, especially in these times that we're living in. I'm also from Puerto Rico, and I have a very diverse family. I have Black people in my family. I have people that are even slightly Asian, have roots in Asia, and I just wanted to sort of ask the panelists what their opinions are on all of these different struggles of different minorities. How can we support them without minimizing the others?
Yeah, I can go first. I like to think that progress in any form helps everybody, right? And I think that there are a lot of groups out there in different companies. A lot of the times they're called employee resource groups within the companies, and even some within IGDA and other games industry organizations. And I think as each of us continue to make progress, we're making progress that's going to help everyone. So I don't think that there's a way necessarily that we are cannibalizing each other's progress. I think that a lot of us, our struggles and our journeys are different, but our goal is the same, to achieve more equality and more opportunity for people who currently don't have any.
Yeah, it's interesting because as people learn more of the rules of allyship, those rules of allyship carry over across many different groups of people. They still apply to women, they apply to the queer community, they apply to people of color. And learning how to speak up and, and raise these issues and recognize these issues, like Carmen was saying, does benefit everybody. And another thing too is that just collaborating with people who undergo similar kinds of struggles is really important as well. A big thing that me and Carmen did when we were working back at our studio was we were part of the Black Employee Resource Group, and we often teamed up with other employee resource groups for Latinx, for women, for the Pride community, and we work together to build up a stronger presence and do more events that were centered around elevating employees of marginalized groups. So yeah, like Carmen was saying, it's definitely doesn't have to mean that anybody's being cannibalized of attention. It just means that, this all goes back to a greater whole of people being more understanding of different situations and being more aware of everybody who's around them.
All right, I think we have one more question. Is it Claire?
Yes, Claire Rice, you're up. And this may be the last question of the evening if anyone else has it, but we've had it. And thank you very much for waiting this long. But go ahead, Claire.
Hello, nice to see you all. Thank you for existing. Hi to my 2 friends. You know who you are. Actually, 3 friends. I have 3 friends in here. So I was wondering, we've touched on this a little bit, but as a child, I didn't know that game dev was accessible to me. So I'm trying to figure out ways to expose my younger cousin who's absolutely in love with Minecraft. I'm trying to expose him to, game engines like Unity, and UE4 is pretty intuitive in some aspects. So I'm just wondering if you all have ideas on how to expose them to storytelling, game design, art, technical art, beyond Scratch, because I asked my cousin about Scratch and he's like, 6th grade. He's in 6th grade. He's not into Scratch. So I was wondering if you had any pointers on that.
First off, hi, Claire.
Hi.
Second off, I'm going through this right now with my own nieces and nephews, so I can speak to it pretty directly. I'm trying right now to mentor them in a way that is allowing them to experience art from a perspective that I used to have when I was their age. And it's been difficult because they're not me, but I've also been trying to find ways to work with the things that they're already interested in the ways that they know how to learn, because they're both very different from each other too. And so, I've been trying different methods of teaching them about, anatomy and the fundamentals of drawing, and just seeing what they've already been doing and what they're passionate about, and trying to extract that and develop it into a bigger skill. And so I think that's a good starting point of just identifying, what they're interested in. So for example, they're into Minecraft. And so maybe there is a way that they can make, maybe you can make a Minecraft-esque game with them if you know how to do that, or just explore something like, what's interesting to them about Minecraft, and maybe tap into that and expand on it. But I'm sure somebody else can speak to the more technical, learnings of how to get them into game design and stuff like that. But that's been my method.
I think
So.
something I've been trying. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead, man.
Okay. I was just going to say, one of the things, I have a 13-year-old, and the way I approach it with him, it's funny because we were having a side conversation, Claire, about your question in the chat, and several things came up. So Roblox, ROBLOX, is a fantastic stepping stone into getting into game design, game development, art, and everything, right? Because one of the big things with that particular platform is that you can get development exposure, you can get art exposure, sound design, game design, all of that, right? And so I think the scripting language is Lua. And the way that all started with my son is that he saw me mucking around with Game Maker, and so that was one that Sean had also suggested as well. And one of the bigger benefits about Game Maker, I think, versus Roblox is that it's traditionally a 2D engine, and those things are just, you're not using a third dimension. And I know that sounds goofy to say, but it's less complicated because you're not dealing with three-dimensional math as much, right? But yeah, I think either of those two options, getting him exposed to those things and showing him, I don't know, Claire, did you mention that you were in game design or game development?
Yes, I do 2D animation and UI art. So
okay, then I'm definitely going to say Game Maker. Skip what I said about Roblox. Go with Game Maker, so that way that's something that you can say, hey, I've made this 2D animation, you go bring it to life. And you can, and so Game Maker has GML, which is their own little scripting language, and then they also have a drag and drop system, which I'm not going to get into that because I know there's some engineers on this panel who will probably say like, no, don't do any drag and drop, just do straight code. But there's options for younger people to learn and get into it, and there's a ton of resources out there. But I think that would be a great way so that you can just show him like, hey, go take this drawing of yourself, right? And bring it to life. I think that'd be great.
I believe Game Maker Pro and Construct 3 have free versions too.
Hi, Claire. I just wanted to say one thing that I think would also work is with my younger cousins, we play a lot of board games. And I think that a lot of the design principles that we use in digital games translate to other mediums as well. Like I've been playing Magic with them, and we've been playing other board games, and just getting them to think about how does somebody make a game like this, or like what goes behind thinking about how people can interact with this game system. and sometimes that can be a fun way to introduce them to game design as well.
Oh, 100%. I was just gonna say that, and especially if approaching it from the UI UX standpoint, like teaching people or having them teach you how to play their game is also like a great way for them to think about problems and problem solving and solutions, and how to get, you know, one person from point A to point B, which is a lot of, you know, that's, you know, that sort of thinking just helps them as well. So yeah, I say board games. If you play Dungeons and Dragons, just getting them to think narratively. I think that was great. That was great for me. And it opens, you know, it kind of gets them out of their shells as well. So it's great social skills. So yeah, all that.
Are we about ready to wrap up, Mayet?
I believe we are. So that was the last question for the night. I really want to thank all of our panelists, but I also want to give a thanks to John for reaching out to all of us and asking if we wanted to do this. I absolutely jumped on it, and I think everyone on the panel is really happy that they were involved too. So I want to thank everyone on the panel and thank John, and wish everyone a wonderful evening.
And to the audience, thank everyone for being with us this late. Thanks to Mayet and the panel. At least two of the members of the panel had power outages. Richard had to leave early, but Carmen's still in his car. Thank you very much for the commitment and giving us so much of your time and your expertise on this. And to point out the obvious, it's Black History Month, but it's great to also hear things about Black present and the history none of us have yet to experience, the future. And to put all that into context, we had people from all over the country visiting, and to point out the obvious that even though Carmen's looking to move to Seattle to work for Wizards of the Coast there, everyone's in Austin right now. And we want to give Austin the credit for being a place that people ought to want to live, and give a reason people would be glad that they're in it. So thank you all for participating in this. We'll have another Video Game Makers Unite show, hopefully announced very soon, but it won't be until April. So until then, keep in touch and stay safe. Have a good night.